Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'm going to talk about the homeowners association that is demanding access to my ranch. In the morning, a bright white crossover rolled up to the front gate of my lakeside ranch. I was elbow deep in cedar planks, patching the dock, when a shrill honk echoed across the water. At first I figured it was the parcel driver and kept hammering, but the honking grew into a frantic Morse code. I wiped my hands, trudged up the slope, and found a perfectly coiffed woman in business casual armor tapping her high heel against the gravel. She introduced herself as Maxine, compliance chair for the Lakeshore Bluffs Property Owners Association. The title sounded inflated enough to float a parade balloon. Before I could reply, Maxine flicked open a binder bristling with sticky tabs. Per Section 8 of our community code, we require immediate inspection access to all parcels within the Lakeshore Bluffs zone. Hand over a copy of your ranch keys so we can walk the premises this afternoon. She said it the way someone orders an iced latte, entitled Impatient, utterly sure the universe revolved around her clipboard. I laughed, thinking she'd confused me with a neighbor. I'm not part of your HOA. My land predates Lakeshore Bluffs by, a century or so. You must have the wrong parcel. Maxine's lips tightened. Your fence line abuts our southern nature trail. The developer's map shows your acreage inside our environmental stewardship overlay. That makes it subject to inspection, right-of-way, and amenity maintenance. Keys, please. I have 3 more stops. She thrust a palm out like a traffic cop. Now I'd heard rumors the shiny new subdivision south of the lake had been flexing on longtime locals, telling folks where to park their tractors, fining kids for fishing. But this, demanding a master key to a working ranch they didn't own, that was a new level of nerve. I steadied my voice. Maxine, you're trespassing. This is private property. Unless you've got a court order, that gate stays locked. Her nostrils flared. She actually reached for the chain on the gate, rattled it, then jabbed a manicured finger at me. If you refuse, we'll add non-compliance fees to your account and lien the property inside 30 days. You can't keep us out. That did it. I called out for my healer, Ranger, mostly to let Maxine know I had backup with sharp teeth, then stepped closer so she felt the difference between subdivision bylaws and state law. Ma'am, under Title 18 of our state code, unauthorized entry beyond a locked agricultural gate is criminal trespass. You're already flirting with charges. Leave. Maxine's cheeks went crimson. This isn't over. She spun on her pumps, jumped in the crossover, and peeled off, spitting gravel behind her like an angry lawnmower. I figured that was the end of it until the letters started. The first envelope bore the HOA's gold leaf logo. Inside, a final notice, asserting $1,200 in inspection penalties, plus a line item for key duplication administrative fee. I laughed so hard I nearly sprained something and tossed it on the junk pile. Week 2 brought a certified letter citing the same penalties, now with late fees and threats to escalate to legal remedy. Week 3, a process server tried to slap me with paperwork, but mispronounced my last name so badly the sheriff's deputy escorting him snorted and told the server to try again later. By then, I'd pulled the original deed, the updated survey from when I bought the ranch, and the plat maps filed with the county recorder. They proved, plain as daylight, that my land ended a good 300 feet north of Lakeshore Bluffs border. The HOA's glossy environmental overlay had about as much legal weight as a grocery flyer. Still, Maxine persisted. She left voicemails at midnight, slid notices under the gate, even taped a neon pay or vacate poster to my mailbox. Ranger shredded that one before breakfast. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with garden-variety busybodies. This was a full-blown power grab, and the only language bullies respect is pushback. I called Callista, my attorney friend downtown. She specializes in property law and once helped a farmer fight off a mining company that tried to reroute a creek. She listened, whistled, and said, "They're banking on you folding because HOA boards get away with intimidation all the time. Document everything. We'll torch them with a cease and desist, then see if they're dumb enough to cross the line." We fired off the letter the next morning. Certified, return receipt, legal citations bolded for flair. 2 days later, a brand new padlock at my south gate was cut clean through. Whoever did it left behind half the shackle on the ground, still warm from the grinder. Tracks showed a golf cart had driven a couple hundred yards onto my pasture and turned donuts, tearing up the ryegrass I'd planted for the horses. Callista told me to call the sheriff. The deputy who arrived took photos, collected the lock fragments for fingerprints, and shook his head. Hate to say it, but those HOA folks feel untouchable. We'll run the prints, but they're probably wearing gloves. Install cameras, and if you catch them inside the fence again, we'll charge them. So I installed cameras, 6 of them. Solar-powered, cellular-linked, motion-triggered, and invisible to anyone not looking for them. The very next night, a drone buzzed over the barn at 2 a.m., spotlight sweeping like a tiny alien ship. The footage showed the craft's serial number. One subpoena later, we traced it to Sterling, Lakeshore Bluff's HOA president, and, no surprise, Maxine's husband. Sterling claimed it was a wildlife survey authorized by the board. Wildlife my boot, he was casing my place. Callista filed for a protective order citing stalking and trespass. The judge signed it faster than you could say abuse of airspace. We served Sterling at his front porch during a Saturday board meeting. The look on his face could have soured milk. That should have ended things, but Sterling and Maxine doubled down. They put out a community bulletin calling me a rogue landowner jeopardizing neighborhood safety. They hosted an emergency HOA vote authorizing further action, though they never explained what that meant. Meanwhile, my mailbox got smashed twice, and someone left a dead fish on my dock. An odd intimidation tactic, but decidedly unpleasant. At this point, I wasn't just protecting my ranch, I was protecting the principle that private property is private, period. So I decided to get creative. First, I reached out to a buddy, Sawyer, who works at the county assessor's office. He confirmed that Lakeshore Bluffs had recently applied to annex a sliver of state-owned shoreline as common area without properly notifying adjacent owners. A hearing was scheduled in 3 weeks and public comment was welcome. Second, I called Deputy Lane, the same officer who handled the cut padlock. He agreed to park an unmarked cruiser on the ridge the night before the hearing, just in case the HOA planned one last inspection. Finally, I set a little decoy. A shiny new lock on the south gate, but wired inside was a die pack, the kind banks use. Non-toxic, but it explodes with bright blue ink if the shackle is severed. It's perfectly legal on my own gate, I checked. A sign warned, "Tamper and you will be marked." I doubted Maxine would read it in her haste. 3 nights later, around 11 p.m., my phone pinged. Motion detected at gate cam 3. I opened the live feed and watched 2 figures approach, lugging bolt cutters. Even through grainy night vision, I recognized Maxine's jittery posture and Sterling's oversized fleece vest. They snipped the lock. Boom! Indigo mist enveloped them, soaking clothes, hair, everything. They fled, squealing. Deputy Lane intercepted their golf cart a minute later. Sterling tried to claim they were on a sanctioned hazard inspection, but the deputy recited the protective order, cuffed Sterling for violation, and cited Maxine for criminal trespass. The die was bright enough to see from space. The next morning, Lakeshore Bluffs woke up to a spectacle. Its president and compliance chair, streaked blue from head to toe, doing the perp walk into the county jail. Photos hit local social media before they reached the station. But the showdown wasn't over. The annexation hearing loomed, and I suspected the HOA had greased a few palms to push it through. If they succeeded, they'd claim the sliver of state shoreline, then argue my ranch fell inside their environmental overlay after all. I needed to squash that scheme publicly. So I gathered every scrap of evidence, the drone footage, the broken locks, the certified letters, the protective order violation, plus Ranger cam videos of Sterling littering the dock with that fish. Callista built a neat timeline, each point backed by law. Then we invited local press. Small-town papers love colorful property feuds, especially ones with blue-stained villains. On the day of the hearing, I dressed in my best boots and cleanest flannel, drove to the courthouse and took my seat. Rows of Lakeshore Bluffs residents filled the benches, most looking embarrassed by their leadership's blue makeover. Sterling sat near the back, freshly scrubbed but still faintly smurfish around the ears. Maxine wore a scarf that failed to hide azure streaks in her hair. The county commissioner opened the floor. Sterling stood, voice shaking, and launched into a speech about environmental stewardship, community cohesion, and bringing order to the lakefront. He never once mentioned property rights. When my turn came, I walked to the podium, spread out the photos, and spoke plain truth. My ranch has been a working agricultural property since the 1920s. The HOA's overlay map is a self-invented document. They've trespassed, vandalized, stalked, and attempted to unlawfully seize keys to my home. Here's the protective order they violated 3 days ago. I handed the commissioner the signed order, still crisp. Granting their annexation would reward criminal behavior. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sterling's face went the color of spoiled blueberries. Callista followed with a concise legal argument citing state statutes. You can't annex property without notifying adjacent owners. You can't impose HOA covenants retroactively. You certainly can't demand keys from non-members. Anyone with half a law book could see the annexation attempt was built on sand. The commissioner leaned back, rubbed his temples, and finally announced, "Application denied." Further, the board finds that Lakeshore Bluffs HOA has violated county notice requirements. Future applications will be subject to heightened scrutiny. Maxine shot to her feet. "You can't—" Security escorted her out before she finished. A sense of relief washed over me, but I knew this saga wasn't wrapping up quietly. Sterling still chaired that HOA. Their fines and letters still cluttered my inbox, and I just humiliated them in public. As I left the courthouse, an elderly Lakeshore resident, Mrs. Weller, I'd met her once at the farmer's market, stopped me. She whispered, "Most of us never wanted any of this. The board's gone rogue. If you're willing to help, we'd like to recall them." A recall? Now that was an intriguing new plotline. I glanced back at the courthouse steps where Sterling stood arguing with his lawyer, blue shadows tinting his collar. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. Maybe he realized the tide had turned. I tipped my hat to Mrs. Weller. "I'm in. Give me a call tonight. We'll talk strategy." As I drove home along the lake, sunset painted the water bronze, and Ranger dozed in the passenger seat. The ranch gate, guarded by fresh cameras and gleaming locks, came into view. Beyond it lay my fields, my barns, my hard-won peace. I'd fought too long to let a power-hungry HOA steal any piece of it. And something told me the real reckoning had only just begun. The phone rang before I'd even set my boots by the door that night. Mrs. Weller might have been 80-something, but she talked with the energy of a teenager on double espresso. "We've got 21 homeowners ready to sign a recall petition," she said. "Board bylaws require 30% of lots. That's 27 signatures. You know more locals than anyone. Can you help us cross the lake tomorrow and knock doors?" Helping the very neighborhood that had harassed me felt a bit like handing soup to someone who'd egged my truck, but Sterling and Maxine weren't the entire community. Most residents just wanted peace and property values, not drama, and frankly, kicking out a corrupt board sounded like poetic justice. I agreed. Saturday morning, I loaded Ranger, a stack of clipboards, and a cooler of lemonade into the skiff. We slid across mirror-flat water, fog trailing off like smoke. On the opposite shore, Lakeshore Bluffs looked picture-perfect. Fresh paint, manicured lawns, ornamental pears blossoming in neat rows. You'd never guess the place was governed by wannabe warlords. Mrs. Weller stood on the dock waving a cloth tote full of petitions. Beside her was Lucian, a trim guy in his 30s who introduced himself as the HOA's treasurer. Well, former treasurer. He'd resigned after Sterling refused to show receipts for a six-figure lakefront improvement fund. Lucian suspected the money financed those drone toys and legal scare letters. We broke into teams. Ranger and I paired with Lucian. At each door, I let homeowners vent. Turns out Sterling's crazy wasn't reserved for me. He'd find a widower for a non-neutral mailbox color. The poor guy's box was beige, apparently too whimsical. Another family got warnings because their kid's sidewalk chalk was graffiti. Signing our recall felt like sweet revenge for them. By noon, we'd collected 34 signatures, 7 over the threshold. Lucian insisted we turn them in immediately, before Sterling could catch a whiff. The bylaws required the board to schedule a special meeting within 14 days of receiving a valid petition. Easy math. 2 weeks to prepare the community, and Sterling's reign might crumble. But we underestimated Maxine's spite. That night, someone hacked the community email list and blasted a public safety alert, claiming the recall petition was fraudulent, that outside agitators, me, were plotting to rezone the neighborhood for industrial hog farming. The message instructed residents to withdraw signatures and report suspicious petitioners to board security. It ended with a phone number that rang to Maxine's office voicemail. The lie was ridiculous, but panic spreads faster than truth. Sunday morning, my cell buzzed nonstop with unfamiliar numbers. One caller demanded to know if I planned to build a hog lagoon. Another offered to buy my ranch outright if I'd promised to leave the lake. I spent half the day calming people down. Lucian, meanwhile, discovered the HOA's website had been edited to change the petition threshold from 30% to 2/3 majority. Nice try. He printed the PDF bylaws on archive.org, highlighted the original clause, and taped it to every mailbox before dawn. Guerrilla transparency. Maxine countered by filing for a temporary restraining order against me, alleging I'd threatened her with large aggressive livestock. The judge denied it after viewing my security cam footage. Me 40 feet away, Ranger snoozing, Maxine shrieking about overlays. The denial order became another piece of evidence of her nonsense. While all this brewed, Callista reached out to the State Real Estate Commission. She suspected Sterling had practiced law without a license by drafting pseudo-legal liens. Turns out he'd mailed at least 4 families intent to foreclose notices signed simply Sterling ESQ. He wasn't a lawyer. He barely had a bachelor's in hospitality management. The commission opened an investigation. 12 days after filing, the recall meeting took place in the community clubhouse. Picture a shiplap-lined hall with wagon wheel chandeliers. Good for potlucks, less good for mudslinging. Attendance was standing room only. I stayed near the exit so no one could call me an outside intimidator. Sterling opened with a PowerPoint of half-truths, property values rising under his leadership, crime dropping, landscaping contracts negotiated below market rate. Lucian walked to the front, flashed a spreadsheet of actual expenses showing Sterling's deals were 40% higher than the old vendors. Gasps. Mrs. Weller, voice wobbly but fierce, read statements from residents the board had bullied. The chalk-drawing family's little girl stood beside her holding a sign. Chalk is not a crime. Finally, the vote, paper ballots counted by 2 neutral volunteers, a pastor and the town librarian. Result? 67-9 in favor of removing Sterling, Maxine, and the secretary, a childhood friend of Maxine's. The crowd erupted. Someone even rang a cowbell. Ranger barked along from outside. But if you think sore losers bow out gracefully, you've never met a power-drunk HOA exec. The very next dawn, I found orange stakes driven in a line across my north pasture, each topped with survey ribbon fluttering like dystopian bunting. A laminated notice zip-tied to the first stake read, "Future site of Lakeshore Bluffs Lakeview Pathway. Easement recorded with county clerk." Easement? I marched to the clerk's office. Sure enough, Sterling had filed a quitclaim deed granting the subdivision a 20-foot strip along my shore for community recreation in perpetuity. The signature purporting to be mine was an awful forgery. Wrong middle initial, letters slanted uphill like a cheap autograph. Somehow the clerk accepted it, probably because Sterling slipped it in with a stack of routine setbacks, and the staff was swamped. Bureaucracy roulette. Callista nearly choked on her coffee when she saw the document. "That's felony recording fraud," she said, already dialing the county prosecutor. She also called the title insurer who'd handled my purchase. They dispatched their own counsel because fraudulent easements threaten liability. Suddenly, I had a small phalanx of suit-wearing allies. We demanded an emergency hearing to invalidate the deed. The judge scheduled it in 72 hours. Until then, deputies posted no trespassing tape and ordered Sterling off my property. He complied, sort of. He parked a deck chair on the public road and live-streamed himself ranting about big ranch oligarchs trampling the little guy's right to walk near water. Viewers, 17 angry retirees, and weirdly, 2 bots posting cryptocurrency links. The hearing was swift. Sterling appeared without counsel. His third attorney had just withdrawn, citing non-payment. The clerk testified she'd accepted the deed, believing it genuine. Callista produced my original notarized signature from the mortgage file and an affidavit from the notary public swearing she never signed new documents for me. Sterling stammered about implied consent. The judge's gavel hit like thunder. Deed void, court referring matter to the district attorney for criminal charges. Maxine, meanwhile, tried to salvage her reputation by showing up at the new HOA board's first meeting, sporting a fresh platinum pixie cut to hide leftover blue. She offered to consult on compliance for a fee. They declined. She stormed out, but not before telling half the room I secretly watered cattle with lake water in violation of environmental codes. Nobody bit. With Sterling facing indictment and Maxine socially radioactive, you'd think the saga would wind down. Yet one last twist awaited. Lucian dug into Sterling's Lakefront Improvement Fund and found $48,000 missing from escrow. Bank statements showed withdrawals to a shell LLC named Blue Wave Consulting. Guess who the managing member was? Maxine. Tracing Blue Wave's expenditures led to drone purchases, designer clothes, and a down payment on a Tesla. The new HOA board voted unanimously to sue Sterling and Maxine for restitution. Callista suggested we file a separate civil suit for my crop damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. I wasn't keen on courtroom marathons, but letting them skate seemed wrong. Plus, small claims court caps wouldn't cover the pasture repairs. We filed in Superior Court. Discovery produced delicious evidence, emails where Maxine coached Sterling on expanding community overlay boundaries quietly and leveraging fear-based compliance fees. My favorite line, most ranch types fold when hit with big word letters, highlighted, enlarged, mounted on a foam board, jury catnip. 2 days before the civil trial, Sterling's new lawyer offered settlement. Full restitution for grass damage, $7,900, payment of my attorney fees to date, and a public apology at the HOA amphitheater. I added one condition. They donate $10,000 to the county 4-H program. Seeing their faces at that suggestion was almost worth foregoing cash, but eventually they agreed, figuring it looked charitable. The apology ceremony drew half the county. Sterling, wearing a suit one size too big, his old one still faintly blue, read from a prepared statement. He admitted forging the deed, trespassing, and causing unnecessary distress. Maxine refused to read her portion until the judge supervising the settlement threatened jail time for contempt. She finally choked out 3 sentences, each dripping with insincerity. When they stepped off stage, a gaggle of 4-H kids swarmed the mic to thank them for the surprise donation. Sterling tried to smile for photos. A goat nibbled his pant cuff. Cosmic justice. But the legal punishment wasn't finished. 3 months later, Sterling pleaded no contest to felony recording fraud and misdemeanor trespass. The judge sentenced him to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service picking litter along county roads, and barred him from serving on any homeowners association board for 5 years. Maxine got fined by the Real Estate Commission, lost her license for a year, and paid a civil penalty of $25,000. She's now rumored to be selling timeshares in another state. Lakeshore Bluffs has a new board. Quiet, transparent, boring in the best possible way. They installed a little community dock properly, with permits, and invited me to the ribbon cutting. I declined the giant scissors, but sent Ranger with a life vest as goodwill ambassador. He fetched sticks for kids all afternoon. As for my ranch, the grass healed, the cameras stay up, and the locks remain die-pack ready, just in case future geniuses forget property lines. I spend more evenings on the porch now, watching lavender light fade over the water. Grateful that sometimes the system, when prodded hard enough, actually works. I've still got the blue-stained lock shackle on my mantle, a paperweight, a conversation piece, and a reminder. Hand me a ridiculous demand for keys to my life, and you'd better be ready for a very vivid, very permanent splash of consequences. Peace is a lot like lake water at dawn. Glass one moment, rippled the next. After the apology ceremony and the criminal plea, daily life settled back into feed runs, fence checks, and fixing the outboard that always quits when friends visit. Weeks went by with no fresh notices, no night drones, no neon flyers. I almost forgot to glance at the south camera feed before bed. Almost. Then the bank called. "Hi," said a cheerful loan officer voice. "We're updating your ag line renewal and noticed an encumbrance in the county GIS overlay labeled Lakeshore Bluffs Community Zone, Shared Access Corridor. Can you confirm you've cleared the easement?" I nearly swallowed a roofing nail. The forged quitclaim deed had been voided, but whoever maintained the county's public-facing map layer hadn't removed the shaded polygon. To the untrained eye, it still looked like my shoreline sat inside some HOA-colored blob. Lenders see blobs, lenders get nervous, rates climb. I drove straight to the county planning office. Different department than the recorder. Different software, too. A cartographer in a logo fleece, Benji, pulled up the map and said, "Yeah, we import developer shape files wholesale. Nobody told us the annexation died." He clicked around. "Deleting a layer triggers re-indexing. Could take a week." "A week is fine," I said. "Just mark it inactive so nobody relies on it." Benji squinted. "You want an affidavit saying the overlay has no regulatory effect?" "Yes, yesterday." To his credit, he drafted a one-pager on the spot, printed it, stamped it, and handed me 2 copies. I sent one to the bank, one to Callista. Rate crisis averted. Still, it bothered me that a colorful GIS smear almost undid months of legal work. Paper trails matter. Pixels matter too. The new HOA board, now chaired by Lucian, asked if I'd attend their next meeting to explain what happened so future boards wouldn't repeat Sterling's power trip. I hesitated, then said yes. I figured if I didn't help write the new playbook, someone lazier would. That meeting turned out to be unexpectedly constructive. Folks brought muffins instead of complaints. They wanted a good neighbor protocol that spelled out where HOA authority ended and how to coordinate with non-member adjacent owners. Me, a church camp upriver, and a timber tract west side. We drafted bullet points on mutual courtesy calls before heavy equipment work, correct use of parcel numbers, and a standing invitation for voluntary, not compulsory annual safety walkthroughs where boundaries were clarified with orange paint dots and GPS pins, not lawyer letters. Lucian added one clause I insisted on. Possession of keys, codes, or gate remotes to any non-member parcel shall remain solely at the discretion of that parcel's owner. No request shall imply obligation. It passed unanimously. Seeing those words in their bylaws felt like putting a lid on a pot that had boiled for a year. Maxine hated it, obviously. Though barred from serving, she attended as a homeowner at large and tried to amend the clause with, unless needed for emergency mitigation. I offered my own emergency protocol. I'd lodge a code in a sealed envelope with the sheriff's office, accessible only under written emergency declaration. Everyone liked that better. Maxine glared, scribbled notes, and left early. Around this time, wildfire season started weirdly early. Lightning storms rolled in dry and grasses cured fast. The county fire marshal, Iris, sent notices urging defensible space. HOA common lots got mowed, sort of. The strip behind Maxine's house, though, sat thick with knee-high cheatgrass, ironically bordering my pine windbreak. I didn't want to interact with her, but fire doesn't respect property lines. I emailed the new board and CC'd Iris. Happy to help brush hog the shared fence lane if you coordinate access. Lucian called within the hour. Please, half our volunteers are traveling. We'll open the back gate at 8 a.m. Saturday. You lead, we follow. Saturday dawned dusty orange. I trailered the tractor over and an HOA work crew actually showed. Kids, retirees, even the chalk drawing family. Maxine emerged late wearing sunglasses the size of saucers, arms crossed. Don't scalp my native meadow, she warned. Those are invasive cheatgrass seed heads, Iris replied deadpan. If we get a spark, this whole block goes up like kindling. The mower roared. The meadow shrank. Mid-cut, we uncovered buried irrigation hose snaked across the property line. Another Sterling-era improvement, tapping water from my stock tank overflow. No wonder my level mysteriously dropped in early summer last year. I clamped it off. Lucian took photos for reimbursement claims. Maxine said nothing, just turned and walked inside. 2 weeks later, a lightning strike hit a ridge north of the lake. Flames ran downhill fast. Air tankers painted the slope pink. Volunteers scrambled. Our newly cleared strip slowed the flank long enough for dozers to pinch it off. If we hadn't mowed, the fire marshal's report later estimated a high likelihood of structure loss in Lakeshore Bluffs. Neighbors started joking, not entirely joking, that my brush hog did more for property values than any of Sterling's beautification initiatives. The goodwill wave finally let me launch a dream, a pasture and pond field day for the subdivision's city kids who thought cattle were just background scenery. Families signed waivers, scrubbed boots and disinfectant, then toured the working side of my ranch, feed bins, irrigation valves, and a lesson on why you never demand a copy of someone's ranch keys, unless you're prepared to juggle 19 different locks. Parents laughed and kids posed with giant plywood keys I'd cut on the bandsaw. My favorite bit of malicious compliance came when Maxine, still chasing relevance, tried to breeze past the waiver table. Our teenage volunteer, Talia, blocked her with a polite smile. Everyone signs, no exceptions. Maxine grudgingly scribbled her name, stomped through the sanitizer, and reached the key station, where I handed her a blank brass key on a ribbon. Souvenir, I said. Opens nothing, represents everything. The crowd chuckled. She did not. Later, Talia discovered the board's email hack had come from Sterling's recycled password. She set up two-factor authentication and gave the HOA a crash course in spotting phishing. Digital revenge counts too. With Sterling's restitution nearly paid and my pasture healed, neighbor relations warmed fast. The chalk drawing family now decorates their driveway each season, and the widower with the once non-neutral mailbox chairs the architectural committee. First motion passed. Any earth tone mailbox is fine. We joke about making keychains that read, "Ask politely." The 4-H kids sold out of them in an hour. Not every ripple was small. County commissioners asked me to testify on a model ordinance to stop overlay confusion. I insisted on a plain English summary whenever a developer files a covenant map. It passed 5-0 and 2 neighboring counties copied it. Callista teased that I'd become an accidental lobbyist. I'd rather muck stalls, but if talking saves someone else a year of mailbox drama, I'll talk all day. Maxine's fines survived appeal. Sterling sold his Tesla to cover IRS penalties, and her cottage now sports a price-reduced sign. When a tech startup proposed an innovation campus at the old sawmill, the HOA asked me to co-host a quanda. We kept the meeting civil, and the developer agreed to wider shoreline setbacks and a public boat ramp. Progress without pitchforks. Who knew? Last week, Lucian texted during a heat-induced blackout, "Can we fill the community water tote from your well?" I hauled it over. Retirees waving from golf carts like I was the ice cream man. Mrs. Weller slipped me a slice of lemon chess pie and thanked me for everything. As the sun dropped, kids chased fireflies across the freshly mowed buffer, land that a year ago was a battlefield. That night, I sat on my porch, fingering the blue-stained shackle that still lives on the mantel. Maxine tried to seize my keys and wound up handing the whole lake a masterclass in property law and neighborliness. Rights once defended don't have to shout, they just have to hold. I hung the single brass ranch key on its hook, locked the door, and watched moonlight flash cobalt on the quiet gate. Friends, thank you. See you soon.